So much, Julie. On behalf of the NCI and the Center for Global Health, it's really been delightful to be able to participate in this meeting since it was first initiated and to work with ASCO to continue to move this the field forward. So just to start, I was asked to speak for a few minutes today about equity in global oncology, which is an issue I think we all care deeply about. Next slide, please. To start, I thought it would be helpful to briefly put my remarks in context. This year's just concluded ASCO annual meeting, as you all are aware, had equity as its theme, and I'm certain that many of us found Dr. Pierce's president's address during the opening session inspiring in its extended elaboration on this theme. Dr. Sharpless similarly alluded to some of our NCI efforts in his address during the opening session. He mentioned our equity and inclusion program, the overall structure of which is shown at right from a slide presented to the NCI Board of Scientific Advisors at our last virtual meeting in March. I've been fortunate to be able to chair the working group focused on promoting an inclusive and equitable community at NCI, which I think fortuitously is shown at center bottom in this schema, as I think it's truly foundational for the entire program. For those of you interested in hearing more about these efforts at NCI, I'd encourage you to tune in for next week's public joint meeting of the NCI Board of Scientific Advisors and National Cancer Advisory Board, where progress across these activities will be discussed at length. Next slide, please. But to pivot now, I was asked to speak about equity in global oncology, and I think we must start by first acknowledging that global oncology has not always been equitable in a number of different ways. As just one example of global cancer research inequities, shown here is a recent paper analyzing all phase 3 randomized clinical trials in oncology between 2014 and 2017. As shown at left, these are not well matched to global disease burden, as many of the commonest cancers worldwide that are particularly common in LMICs were not among the most frequently studied cancers, like cancers of the liver and cervix. As shown at right, clinical trials in LMICs constituted only 8% of all oncology trials, but oncology trials in LMICs were more likely to meet their primary endpoints with statistical significance, which occurred in approximately 2/3 of trials in LMICs versus less than half in high-income countries. Next slide, please. Moreover, even when global cancer research is successfully conducted in LMICs, there are additional inequities when results are disseminated. Even though oncology RCTs in LMICs appeared to address common cancers worldwide and were more likely to be scientifically informative, these were not well represented in the highest impact journals, which are dominated by oncology RCTs from high-income countries. This was true for all oncology trials, as shown at left, and also when restricted to oncology trials with positive results, as shown at right. Next slide, please. Even when global cancer research is successfully conducted in LMICs and published in high-impact journals, there are additional inequities in translating results back to communities. I've briefly illustrated that here using Burkitt lymphoma as an example. Starting at top left in 1958, the Irish surgeon Dennis Burkitt discovered a new human tumor among children in Uganda. Over ensuing decades, this led to the discovery of a new human oncogenic virus, the discovery of multi-agent chemotherapy as an effective treatment, the discovery of the human c-Myc oncogene, comprehensive molecular characterization, and continued therapeutic optimization to produce truly amazing patient outcomes. However, we have not yet delivered a broadly deployable curative solution back to the very children who helped initiate these decades of progress. I say this because during the decade that I lived and worked in sub-Saharan Africa before coming to NCI last year, I routinely saw children who presented just as they did in the 1950s and 1960s and had similar outcomes to children in the 1950s and 1960s. Next slide, please. So I now want to briefly return to the United States, where there are major inequities in the cancer clinical and research workforce. An important poster discussion at this year's meeting, shown at left, demonstrates highly inequitable representation across oncology training programs in the United States and a lack of significant improvement between 2015 and 2020. At right is a recent paper describing the demographic characteristics of biomedical researchers more generally in the United States in 2016. Whites are overrepresented compared to national proportion, and other groups underrepresented compared to national proportion. And this skew gets worse at later career stages. This is despite an increasing proportion of Black and Hispanic PhD recipients over time, which is shown at bottom right, suggesting it is not a broken pipeline that is the barrier, but rather structural racism, which needs to be systematically dismantled. Harold Varmus, who created the Center for Global Health 10 years ago when he was the NCI director, was the last author on the paper shown at right. And he and I had an opportunity to discuss this issue in a conversation we recently recorded and hope to post on our website soon. I was really encouraged that he and I think somewhat similarly about this problem. That is, there may be uniquely domestic aspects to much of this, which require specific policy responses and organizational changes at US institutions, but these issues are also not unconnected to the broader pursuit of global health equity. Next slide, please. Reflecting this thematic linkage, I want to travel abroad again momentarily to Malawi, where the research group we began to build in 2012, 8 years before George Floyd was murdered, became an important training environment for numerous young researchers interested in global cancer, 50% of whom self-identify as Black. Just to highlight a few of these shining stars, Dr. Tamiwe Tamoka is the first ever female pathologist in Malawi's history and is conducting molecular breast cancer profiling studies within our program. Dr. Lamek Chinula is the only Malawian citizen currently holding a research grant from NCI as contact principal investigator and is leading national cervical cancer research and control efforts. Dr. Shakina Elmore was recently recruited to join our Malawi research program, becoming the only Black radiation oncologist at the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center. And Dr. Steve Kimani is completing his fellowship training and will soon join the Huntsman Cancer Institute as its only Black medical oncologist. I believe that a commitment to equitable global cancer research attracts a diversity of thought that is otherwise not as evident in cancer research as we would like. This belief is in part supported by the privilege I enjoyed in working with the remarkable group shown on this slide before coming to NCI last year. Next slide, please. And like the NCI commitment to equity, which Dr. Sharpless spoke about, we are also really committed to advancing global health equity at the NCI Center for Global Health as we learn from our many partners and from conversations like the one we're having today. One recent example of our commitment is a dedicated session related to global health equity, which we convened at the recent annual Symposium on Global Cancer Research. We used the Mentimeter tool during the session to engage our attendees as participants, which I believe we'll have a chance to use today as well. And you can see some of the suggestions provided by participants from around the world with respect to how cancer research can be successfully translated globally and how we can ensure equity in global cancer research collaborations. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I'll remind everyone that Dr. Sharpless mentioned during his opening session address that it is the 50th anniversary of the National Cancer Act. It is also the 10th anniversary of the Center for Global Health. These simultaneous anniversaries, together with the ongoing global pandemic and a universal aspiration for equity that is being manifested worldwide, present important opportunities for a renewed and ambitious strategy for global cancer research and control. We believe that with sustained and strategic effort, we can reduce cancer burden everywhere, realize all scientific opportunities, and promote true research and health equity. Next slide, please. So thank you again. I'll end there and look forward to your comments and questions. I'll briefly invite you to visit our website where you can learn more about our center, including elements of a new strategic plan that will frame our activities over the next several years and which hopefully captures many of the ideas we'll be discussing today. Thanks so much again for your attention.
Thanks, Satish, and congratulations to the NCI Center for Global Health on its 10th anniversary. That time went by quickly, but a lot of progress has been made. Now, relevant to the breakout discussions that we will have in a bit, I'm going to overview the findings of the ASCO Academic Global Oncology Task Force that I had the honor of chairing prior to coming to ASCO in my chief medical officer role. Next slide. This is just a picture of the publication of the recommendations from this task force, where you can see all of my colleagues who were on the task force, and I think most, if not all of them, are on this webinar today as well. This was published in JCO Global Oncology last year. Next slide. So what was this task force all about? Why did ASCO convene the task force? Well, it was really related to a prior task force that had been convened back a few years before. It was called the ASCO Global Oncology Leadership Task Force. And that task force had been asked to advise ASCO in ways that ASCO could contribute to global oncology leadership. And one of the strong recommendations from that prior task force to the ASCO board was that ASCO could serve a role in transitioning global oncology from an informal field of largely voluntary activity to a formal field with a strong research component and recognized value to oncology training and the practice of oncology. This was approved by the ASCO board. Next slide. And because of that recommendation, the Academic Global Oncology Task Force was formed, and it was specifically asked to guide ASCO's contributions toward formalizing the profession of global oncology. They asked the task force to develop recommendations to advance global oncology as an academic discipline, to convene stakeholders within and outside of the global oncology community, and to collect and analyze issues and barriers towards recognition of global oncology as an academic discipline. Next slide. One of the first things we did as a task force is to come up with a definition of global oncology. And this was our best effort, and you can all throw darts at it, but this is what the group consensus was, that global oncology collaboratively addresses disparities and differences in cancer prevention, care, research, education, and the disease's social and human impact around the world. It includes a full spectrum of activities ranging from epidemiology to implementation science to public health policy. Next slide. Part of the task force efforts was to develop a set of competencies for global oncology training. And the competencies, which we are working on a publication specifically of these competencies now, but the competencies were broken up into two pieces. One was competencies in cancer-specific skills and knowledge, but that go beyond that, what you would be expected to learn in standard oncology specialty training. And then a second set of competencies that are not cancer-specific, but more general global health skills and knowledge. So two pieces to the competencies. And in our discussion, when we talked about how would these competencies been put into play, how would we train in global oncology, we envisioned that at least a select number of training programs, not necessarily all by far, but those specializing in the field, could have an advanced fellowship like that we routinely see offered in blood and marrow transplantation. And there are already some of these that are coming into play now. Next slide. Part of the task force efforts was to look at the requirements of the ACGME in terms of what would be required for board certification. So what the task force identified was that there's a significant opportunity for innovation regarding global oncology training within our classic kind of governing board. So innovation here is the key. What we also found was that opportunities for curricular flexibility weren't well understood by many of our training program directors. And here we're specifically talking about work we did with respect to medical oncology training and hematology training, but this is applicable, I believe, although we didn't look into the details as much for other specialties. According to the ACGME, training programs that are in good standing are encouraged to innovate, and that there's room for flexibility with, for example, the continuity clinics requirement. And also there's room for flexibility in the requirements for faculty mentoring if you are outside, if you're in another country, for example, requiring that the faculty be on-site and board certified. That could be done remotely, we were told, if the training program was in good standing. So the conclusion here in looking at global oncology training is that ASCO has an opportunity to provide insights and guidance to training program directors, and we have an opportunity to facilitate trainee participation in international training and electives. Next slide. So here are the 13 primary recommendations that came out of this task force. We broke it into 4 groups: training, research and practice, professional development. And in the publication, we had a bucket one called overall, but I've added partnerships here. And that's what these break up nicely into the 4 different breakout sessions where we're going to ask for your input in how we can take the ideas from these recommendations and partner together to move this forward, not just within ASCO, but more broadly across the world. So let's look at those 13 recommendations. There are 4 under the topic of global oncology training. The first is to promote awareness of global oncology and inclusion of global oncology opportunities in HEMONC training programs. The second is to partner with other oncology subspecialty societies, as well as other review committees of the ACGME. So this is where we get into, yes, it goes beyond HEMONC, clearly. The third was to outline global oncology competencies. And the fourth is to create a repository of global oncology training opportunities and resources for all the trainees. Next. We came up with 4 recommendations under the topic of global oncology research and practice: to advocate for global oncology research, to seek bridge funding for global oncology research. Specifically to ASCO, we said we need more global oncology focused grants, but this goes way beyond what ASCO and the Conquer Cancer Foundation can contribute. We had a recommendation to enhance and disseminate global oncology research, whether in meetings or in journals or beyond. And then the fourth under research and practice was to promote equitable collaborations between researchers in higher resource and low middle resource settings. And this is really, really key. And this has got to be a theme across everything we do in global oncology. This gets back to Satish's presentation about the equity piece. We need to be partners and collaborate with our colleagues who are in low and middle resource settings. Next, we had 2 recommendations under the topic of professional development. We said that ASCO could serve as a professional home for the global oncology community and create networking opportunities, mentoring opportunities, and a repository for career opportunities once you're out of training. We also recommended that we consider recognition for leaders in global oncology in some way, shape, or form, and even discussed, should we consider an award for successful collaborations in global oncology and successful partnering. And then next, under the bucket of overall and partnerships, we said that we should leverage the pre-existing ASCO international programming in terms of all that's offered there, and how we can better disseminate this and collaborate with this, and who we could include in this. We said we should partner with other oncology societies. We strongly feel that that we need to be partners and work together to drive academic global oncology, but also to drive improvements in cancer care more broadly. And then the last recommendation specifically addressed, because we thought that this was really key, the U.S. National Cancer Institute, the NCI Center for Global Health, and the Fogarty Center, but it is not meant to be necessarily U.S. centric. It's just these are important, key, critical partners in all of this. And we could have a list of dozens and dozens and dozens of other governmental partners and beyond. So with that, I'll just overview in this last slide before we go to the breakout sessions, some of the outcomes to date. Some of these start back to that original task force on global oncology leadership. Some have come out of the academic global oncology task force. But in 2019, the ASCO board approved those 13 recommendations that I've just made. In 2020, we published those recommendations. And this year, we hope to publish those competencies in global oncology that we've addressed. We've successfully launched JCO Global Oncology, and our editor-in-chief, Gilberto Lopez, is on the call today and was part of our task force. We've added a global oncology track to the ASCO annual meetings education session. We initiated global oncology specific young investigator awards. We created a global oncology interest group, online forum that's part of ASCO's My Connection web portal. We've been raising awareness of global oncology in ASCO membership through a variety of ASCO Connection articles and other member communications. We've had ongoing dissemination of the findings related to the training programs to the training program directors at various ASCO forums. We have enhanced global oncology networking opportunities at the ASCO annual meeting. The pandemic put a little glitch in this, but JCO Global Oncology held global oncology mentoring office hours at ASCO 2019, and I think we'd like to resume those when we meet face-to-face again in 2022. We're working jointly with ESMO on updating the ESMO ASCO Global Oncology curriculum for medical oncology and incorporating more global oncology themes in that curriculum. And of course, another outcome is today's ASCO-NCI Center for Global Health webinar and the breakout groups and all of the recommendations that we hope to get from all of you. So thanks for your attention. I see that we have posted online a link to the task force report if you want to look at that while you're in your breakout groups. And I'm going to turn this over to, I think, Doug Pyle to tell you a little bit about the breakout groups.
Great, thank you, Julie. Thank you, Satish. Satish, thanks again to the NCI team for collaborating with ASCO again on this meeting. Can't wait to get into the breakouts, so I'll be super quick. Just a reminder, you all signed up for your breakout group when you registered for this meeting, so you'll be going into those groups. Each of the groups will have facilitators to guide the discussion, and this will help us all to look at how to advance each of these domains that Julie described. 3 of the 4 breakout groups, so all of the breakout groups except for the training breakout group, will be using the Mentimeter technology that you've heard so much about today. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up another browser at menti.com, and the codes for the responses will be provided to you in your breakout group. Then when we come back at the end of the breakouts, when we come back to the plenary groups, you'll be asked to provide, also through Menti, provide your thoughts about a key point or two that you heard in your breakout session. So hopefully that is all clear. Thanks again to everyone for participating in this, and yeah, and enjoy your discussions, and let's go into breakouts. Thanks.
Research session. I was in the research session and I was just blown away. I love this Mentimeter concept, and I really think that got a lot of engagement. And so now I'm going to call on our breakout group chairs to try to give in a very brief amount of time, some thoughts on that. So first step is the training group.
All right, thank you, Julie. So my name is Ami Bhatt. I'm an associate professor at Stanford, and I co-founded Global Oncology, the nonprofit. Our group had a really exciting discussion about what we thought was critical for trainees in global oncology to learn. Topics that came up ranged from the importance of having cultural awareness of the community with which you're working, also social and political awareness, also having a good understanding of epidemiology and recognizing the limitations of epidemiology that exist, knowing that some places have very, very good cancer registries, others do not. Related to that, we realized that to encourage our trainees to go into this space, we need to reward the type of research that really fills in gaps. A specific example that was given was trainees can get a really nice paper for doing some next generation sequencing on cancer samples. However, trying to report on a new hospital-based registry doesn't quite carry the same cachet. And that's something that I think all of us can do something about in terms of advocating for the type of research that really fills gaps of knowledge, such as epi. We talked about kind of the personal values and characteristics that are important, including being innovative and creative and adaptable, recognizing that circumstances can be challenging and shifting in some of the places where we work. We also talked about the importance for our trainees to learn leadership and communication skills. Communication skills are critical not only for communicating with other investigators, patients, but also policymakers, as well as to potential granting agencies and funding partners. Recognizing that that is a major issue in any type of scholarship. Most of the time when we move into academic positions, we're responsible for generating our own resources. Being able to communicate effectively about those resources is critical. And we also recognize that because of that, good mentorship around communication, both written and oral, is critical. Finally, we also spoke extensively about the importance of learning organizational skills and quality improvement skills, and recognizing that in doing global oncology training, you're not only learning a particular set of skills, you're also learning a way of being and engaging in an activity that really is health diplomacy. So I hope I've summarized our group's 20-minute discussion well. It was a really, really fantastic breakout group. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Ami. We are going to have time, I think, to discuss all of these recommendations from the breakouts together at the end. So let's move on to a quick report out from the Global Oncology Research Group.
We're going to professional development first. Research will be last.
Okay, so professional development. So we also had a pretty robust discussion, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that will overlap with some of the discussions in the other groups. But thinking about ways ASCO could sort of serve as a mediator for professional development in global oncology. A few ideas that came up in our group was there are already a lot of existing professional development opportunities within ASCO, and thinking about ways of leveraging some of those opportunities and incorporating global oncology into those opportunities. There was also a few comments about publicizing those opportunities because they exist and many people might not know about them, or the right people might not have heard of them. There are also conversations around ASCO serving as a matchmaker. So many people might work in a variety of institutions where the institutions where they work might not necessarily have the type of global oncology resources which might be available somewhere else. Having ASCO sort of serving as the central place where people can come and get matched with a variety of opportunities, mutual interests and whatnot. There were also conversations around thinking about how to incorporate community oncologists into discussions about global oncology, which many times end up being quite academic institution centric. So thinking about what are the incentives for community oncologists who have interest in this, and how can ASCO support them in achieving that interest. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around funding, and I'm sure funding will come up in a variety of other groups as well. So, funding with regards to young investigator award type funding, other types of longitudinal funding, and also support in grant writing, which I'm sure was discussed in the research group too. So, figuring out how to create a process that supports people professionally beyond just the research, but the other forms of career development elements that are required in global oncology. I think the last thing I will talk about was the concept of mentorship and a broad-based mentorship, not necessarily just training mentorship or research mentorship, but including elements around mentorship around ethics of doing global oncology work, mentorship around issues around disparities and equity in this type of work as well. So that's a brief summary of what we discussed in our group.
Great, thanks for that, Dayo. So Mishke, keep me on track. So
sorry, now we're on to partnerships.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Julie. So the partnerships session was great. We had about 21 people and captured a ton of information for the 20 minutes that we had, and welcome folks to put ideas in Menti here while I summarize. And thanks to Chite Sirwa, who co-facilitated this session with me. So I think a couple of key themes that came out of our discussion were thinking about the essential components and priorities for partnerships, specifically partnerships between high-income countries and low-income countries. And a couple of very clear ideas is the idea of, and I'll start with what's been put in the Menti, is bidirectional learning. That is really a key part of partnership, how we should all be learning from one another and establishing communities of practice and networks that promote bidirectional learning as both something that is an essential component of partnerships, but also sustainability of those partnerships. I think the idea of clear roles and clear deliverables with the idea that we have to keep in mind the sort of history of global health and some of the colonialist issues that are there, and ensuring that as we build partnerships, we are building them equitably with training as a component of those. We talked about some of the barriers to collaboration. And I think the key themes that popped up there were time, and just the additional time that it takes to build very valuable and productive collaborations, especially internationally, and making sort of allotments for those times in planning research that is done together. And also, of course, funding, as Dayo mentioned, and I'm sure will come out in others as well, and just having sort of the ability to take the time that's needed, but also have the resources that are needed in all contexts to make these partnerships work. We talked about models in global health that could be useful to emulate as we think about partnerships in global oncology. We had some good ideas submitted via Menti there, and Dr. Shupra Ghosh from MD Anderson shared a model that they currently have to do cervical cancer training and screening in Zambia. And I think one key element there is there are many cancer centers around the world that are developing different models for partnerships, and also for partnerships that facilitate training in global oncology that we should learn more about and emulate. And finally, we discussed the roles of different partners in global oncology, things like NGOs, government agencies, professional societies. And unfortunately, we had the sort of transporter come in right in the midst of this conversation, but really highlighted the importance of ensuring that partnerships promote dissemination of research evidence to the communities where that dissemination needs to go. And again, doing that in a bi-directional fashion is just sort of hitting on the tip of the iceberg of that discussion. But thanks everyone. I think as we are able to distribute and share the results of Menti, there's a lot of rich exchange and recommendations that came in through this group.
Thanks, Kalina. Lots of good discussion and recommendations. And now we are moving on to our research group. And
so hi, I'm Irina Stepanov at the University of Minnesota, and I co-moderated this breakout session with Mark Perscandola. We had a lot of participants, so the only type of discussion we could do is by Mentimeter, but there were a lot of great ideas. So we discussed how we can promote the importance of global oncology research. And the points were made that more work is needed to communicate what global oncology is and potentially communicate the value of public health as part of global oncology as a discipline. Also, comments were made about the need to reach outside the global oncology community to policymakers, advocates, and other communities. And also, it is important to ensure participation from LMIC investigators in any global research projects. Comments were made about publications as a way to promote the importance of this research, publish in open access journals, and also make sure that there are career trajectories for global oncology researchers, supporting training as well. Another item we discussed or questions was how can we advance sustainable and responsive funding models for global oncology research? And of course, one of the key points is that there is a need for bridge funding to get trainees onto the path of independent research. But we also talked about having specific global oncology focused funding mechanisms. We do have some, but to have more focus on developing such opportunities and actually leveraging training awards for LMIC's researchers, for example, K99. We also discussed working more with National Cancer Institute at LMIC countries and thinking more broadly, for example, partnering with pharmaceutical companies or engaging with foundations, international partners like European Commission. Many comments were made about collaborating, potentially partnering with industry. And one important point, of course, is that to advance this sustainable funding, you need to think about building infrastructure, building capacity within LMICs at the same time as we are doing research. Then we talked about promoting equitable collaborations in global oncology research. And of course, funding programs are one of those mechanisms where the equitable distribution of funding and local involvement would be one of the requirements of the program. And also to require shared leadership and effort contribution in NIH funding and in publications also. I'm sorry, I got confused with the notes because there is a lot of comment and shared themes across the questions. Okay, and last we discussed opportunities for dissemination and of global oncology research beyond publications and presentations. And we talked about having more regional conferences and mediums like podcasts that are easily accessible, and making data available on especially dedicated platforms, for example, web resources, and also engaging ministries of health and local communities. So I don't know, Mark, if you had anything else to add.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So yeah, we had a lot of great responses. I guess I would just highlight that I think you know, we also talked about needing to sort of get outside our own community to advocate for the importance and communicate the importance of global oncology, to tell stories about impact, and then as you know, as we already heard, you know, thinking about equitable partnerships was a theme that ran throughout all of our discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark and Irina. And we are so right on time. I can't believe it. So at this point, we had allocated about 15 minutes for a discussion of what we've just heard from our 4 breakouts. And Satish, I'd invite you to join me. Maybe if you have a reaction, just, you know, kind of immediately of something that we should be taking on, or just what are your thoughts about everything that we've just heard?
So thanks, Julie. Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot of great ideas. I think we're hearing fairly consistent themes that we have heard, you know, in many other conversations that we've been having at the NCI Center for Global Health with various other partners recently. I guess getting back to the thing that you and Doug asked me to talk about, which is equity, and which is of course the ASCO theme of the overall meeting. I mean, I am struck by the way in which that is, you know, I think a fairly strong impulse within each of the groups, breakout groups. And, you know, I think for us too, I think reflecting that in our own activities at the Center for Global Health and this new strategic plan that we've been developing over the last year, we have chosen to embrace that as a core value rather than a program, because I think it, you know, for us, it really is the sort of thing that we should be thinking about daily in every conversation that we have about specific programs. So that is immediately striking to me, I guess, in hearing the readouts from the breakout groups, and I think reflects a lot of our own thinking at the Center for Global Health.
And I agree. It's going to take a while to process everything that came in, but I really liked, and I thought I heard through almost all 4 of the groups, you know, some comment on mentorship. I would also point out sponsorship, which is somewhat separate and something, you know, that we should be promoting too, not a you know, a direct mentor, but you know, the use of sponsorship and perhaps allyship and coaching and all of that kind of stuff that comes along with it, that fits, you know, certainly the training, the professional development, the research piece, and clearly would be a part of partnerships as well. So what we've got to figure out is not just to say we need to do it, but how do we do it, right? I also I think it was you, Irina, that specifically said it came out of the research group, but we need to better explain what academic global oncology is. It's not the how do we do everything to fix the global cancer problem. It's basically people whose career is to work on all of those pieces. So slightly different than just saying that what this group is addressing is, you know, how do we, fix the cancer problem in a given country. It's really a career that's devoted to that, right? So there's a distinction there. I'm not explaining it very well, so we need to get our language down so that when we talk about it, people know what we're talking about. And we can work forward. Of course, we care about getting the highest quality, equitable cancer care everywhere. But this specific topic is the careers in this. I did want to share with the group, as of Tuesday, we have a new ASCO president, and Dr. Everett Vokes is our president for the next year. And his theme will be advancing equitable cancer care through innovation. And as part of the tagline related to that, it's by innovating across boundaries, we can bring down barriers to access and make care more equitable, convenient, and efficient for patients worldwide. So there will be a strong continuation of our equity theme and even more of a focus on that everywhere piece of Dr. Pierce's equity, every patient, every day, everywhere. That will also have the innovation piece and the global piece as our theme. So I am not sure how to do this in the short time we have. First, maybe I'll ask the co-chairs of our 4 groups, now that you've heard the presentations from the other groups, are there any comments from you on, concrete recommendations coming out of this meeting?
Well, we cannot make, we cannot make any progress without actually maybe convening another task force. I think that might be the most important message for today. There's just so many things that come from the regional recommendations that we might need to have either a specific group or task force or working group to continue working on these on an ongoing basis. And Julie, I really don't know if we have anything like that going on right now.
Doug, do you want to step in? I mean, ASCO has very clear definitions of the wording of what is a task force, what is a working group, what is a committee. That's our ASCO nomenclature. But Doug, what would be the possibility of an outcome of this meeting being that we should create a few working groups that are tagged to some of these topics that would be short-term and limited, not a committee that stands and it works forever. What do you think about that, Doug?
Yeah, no, I think so. First of all, I've been amazed by all the, and I shouldn't be amazed given the group, but amazed by the amazing ideas that have come out of this. I think, yeah, having some follow-up where some of us break into different groups and advance some of these ideas. I think if we can do it in a way that's fairly self-organized, that doesn't become sort of a thing that needs to be intensively managed. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going and organize some follow-up discussions and move it forward.
I think in the spirit of Gilberto's comment of finding concrete next steps, with respect to communication and how critical it is that people who do this work, or any work really, become efficient and effective at both oral and written communication. I wanted to propose considering supporting, for example, our ASCO Global YIA recipients with a workshop in communicating about science. There are programs like that which the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science generates or develops that are anywhere from few-hour sessions to multi-day sessions where they work actively with investigators across a variety of different backgrounds to help them become more effective in essentially, pitching their work and explaining their work. And so I think this is a really concrete suggestion for something that we could do to invest in the professional development and training of our grantees.
And it could expand beyond just the global oncology YIAs. I understand our topic is on global oncology, but we don't restrict the rest of our Young Investigator Awards or our Career Development Awards, you know, by country and by topic. It's just that we carved out a set number of awards that needed to be on global oncology, but there is some global oncology work being done across some of our other grant mechanisms as well. So that's a great suggestion, Ami, and a very concrete one that we can look at. Any other of our co-leaders of our working groups who want to make a comment?
I could make a couple of comments or a comment. So I recently discovered, personally, I recently discovered some of the ASCO professional development products that are available to young investigators or to just young career folks. So, you know, there are professional development things around leadership, so leadership development, things around training educators, as well as around quality improvement. So those things exist within ASCO, but somehow not everyone might know about them. So I feel like if I just discovered them, there's probably a lot of people who also do not know about them. So how could we sort of leverage some of those existing things and publicizing them, and specifically having global health or equity focused elements to those existing things as well, I think is a potential tangible suggestion.
I like that, Dio. You know, along similar lines, we did a survey of our ASCO members in the United States, asking about, do you think that equity, diversity, and inclusion is important? Do you feel comfortable, you know, that you have the resources that you need? Blah, blah. You know, we asked a lot of these questions, and the overwhelming membership said, yes, this is important, but no, we don't feel we have the tools. And what was, you know, so an outcome of that was, ASCO's got a bunch of tools, but you know what? They're all over the place and different places on the website, and it's hard to know. And, you know, so I think, you know, what I'm hearing you say, Dio, is we have the same problem within global oncology. There already exist certain things, and they might not be global oncology specific even, right? But related to professional development and all, but that anybody doing global oncology could access. But we don't have them all you know, contained in one place or highlighted in one place. So maybe like what we're doing with equity more generally for our members and all the different places we've got information and tools on this, we could do it for global oncology as well. Doug, you have your hand up?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And just to build on, so this group that we've convened here that we've all gathered 100, well, just dropped. It was 101, now it's 10 to 100 once I started talking. I think this is a great group both for input as we're doing now, but also output. If each of you could in some ways serve as ambassadors that can share the resources and the opportunities that exist already and help us to communicate and raise awareness of those opportunities, not just ASCO, but NCI's opportunities and other opportunities, I think that may help raise awareness and get the word out. So on our end, absolutely, I completely agree with what has been said. We can better organize, but once we better organize, also helping us to communicate it through the various channels, that'd be great. Thanks.
So does everybody have access to a list of who participated in this meeting and you know, where they work? Because that could be very helpful. Clearly, if you've participated in this webinar, you are interested in this, and I think we should all know who each other are. So is it possible for us to also share that? Would there be any restrictions on it? Mishka, Kalina, Doug?
I don't think so. Sarah, any? We can look into it. You know, I'm not sure about all the privacy pieces. So we'll take that offline and we'll follow up, but nothing immediately comes to mind.
Great. So it's 22 minutes after the hour, so we have just a little more time, and the plan was to offer some concluding remarks. I guess I would ask if you want to make a quick, brief comment of a recommendation of something you want to really submit that has not yet been discussed. You want to raise your hand, and we can call on you in the last couple of minutes. So do you know how to raise your hand by hitting reactions? I see Abiola raising her hand physically, yeah. So anyway, I'll call on you, Abiola.
All right, so I'm sorry, I was trying to raise my hand through the computer. So I'm thinking that from where I sit, when I tell some people that I do global oncology, they say, and what else? You know, and I've been on this trajectory for over a decade of my life. I originally came from Nigeria because I wanted to improve cancer care in my country. So my thoughts are simply all institutions should be encouraged to at least have a global oncology talk once in a year, so that we can actually improve and start raising awareness, because it's not acceptable that people should still think that global oncology is a thing somebody is doing or a voluntary thing someone is doing. And I think that's the only thing I have to add.
I love that suggestion. And, you know, as we're working with ESMO to update the joint ESMO ASCO Global Oncology curriculum, which is really meant to be a curriculum of the basics of what you know to practice oncology. There is a whole chapter on that, and it's being updated on as part of a general oncology curriculum. There should be some teaching about global oncology, the basics, not enough, you know, to specialize in it. And that is a chapter, and that probably, once we come out with the updated curriculum, we can take that chapter and say, this is what ASCO and ESMO are saying should be included in general about global oncology in every training program. So I'm going to take two quick last questions, and Satish and I are going to close it out. So Irina, I think you had your hand up first, and then Ghassan.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment that as we think about these initiatives, I think it's important to think about sustainability. That is a very, very important element, because we can invest in, you know, some great initiatives, but if there is no plan to make it self-sustainable, that probably won't be a good investment of time and effort, and won't be as productive as it could otherwise be. So building local capacity for research and partnering with local foundations and building these long-running programs would be important to keep on our radar.
Really critical. Don't just plop yourself down, do something, leave, and then nothing comes of it. It's because it's not sustainable. And last comment, Ghassan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. And again, congratulations and thanks for the effort. I was very intrigued, and this is something because we are heavily interested in and very heavily involved in, that Satish knows about, Doug knows about, is whoever brought up medical diplomacy. I'm, of course, happy to share my thoughts, but more important, I would love to see how people are reading medical diplomacy at this point in time. I would love to hear some thoughts.
So that's probably thoughts on that will take more than the couple of minutes we have, but I think this is something that that we can be working on. Satisha, anybody want to jump in?
About diplomacy specifically, or
how do we solve diplomacy in 2 minutes or less?
Yeah, well, so I mean, so as the NCI, we don't do diplomacy, right? There are other parts of the U.S. government that do that. But, you know, I think for us, this kind of gets back to equity. I mean, I think these partnerships have to be built in the right way, so they're addressing real local needs. And I think that then generates the kind of local street cred that you need to, you know, also do trials of new agents or sequencing studies. I mean, I think that these programs have to be really approached holistically. I think if you're, I think in some ways, if you're providing care, that's really important. But if you're not learning from the care that you're providing, I think that's a missed opportunity. Obviously, if you're just generating publications without not delivering something of value to patients and communities, I think that's also, not the right approach. And I think, as reflected in this call, I think there is a real effort to bring these, I think, historically somewhat siloed kind of efforts together in a way that groups like ASCO, or this is exactly what ASCO does domestically, right? Which is to make sure that science is brought to bear on patients. I think those same principles should apply all around the world, and it's actually quite strange that we have not applied them in the way that we should. So.
Julie, if I may just give one word to Satish on that. I love very much, Satish, what you mentioned. This is exactly what I wanted to hear from you. You're absolutely right. It's separate from what we do in medicine. But very briefly, what we have actually for coming next year, this is not going to be only by invitation only at this point because of the high sensitivity of medical diplomacy. But we built in already connectivity among 50 oncologists and geneticists from literally all continents in the world. And we're doing a virtual meeting, be followed by an in-person meeting to look at the germline alterations in areas of divergence of genetics because of conflicts or war. And as you can imagine, we're putting people from different kind of leads and countries that could be in conflict. But so far, I really have to give credit and command for every oncologist all over the world, whoever we spoke with, everybody enthusiastically is very interested in. And Doug, of course, we spoke about that, and we'll make sure that ASCO will be kind of, featured in that regard. But I like the idea that we kind of, have to navigate very gingerly, but clearly it's very swampy, it can be. And of course, we don't want to touch in what we are not experts on, so.
Great. Looking forward to hearing follow-up on that.
Thank you, Judy.
So my concluding remark would be, I'm thrilled to see so much participation in this. We know everyone who's signed up for this and participated, and we plan on calling on you and working with you to help move this forward. We've gotten some great ideas. We're going to be sifting through all of those and doing a summary report as well. And let's all commit to working together to promote the field of academic global oncology with the long-term endpoint is that we're impacting the patients. That's what we've got to get. And I heard several of you say this, and I think this is what we all want. The long-term focus would be to do better for the patients, right? So Satish, you want to give your closing statement?
Well, thanks, everyone. I mean, that's the main closing statement. I think it's great for us as NCI to be parts of these conversations. I think many of the ideas raised are things that we're thinking very seriously about, and look forward to moving programs forward at NCI, and also continuing to partner with all of you, which we know is essential to fulfill our mission. So
great. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for your involvement, and let's keep the momentum going.
Yes.
Thank you. Take
Goodbye.
care.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks, everyone.